2, 1. Small point on characterization, and then we're going to talk about two things: why we think pursuing boredom and running away from pain creates more stability, more self-fulfillment, and why this creates happier people that are more able to reach their goals. So what decisions do we think this looks like? We think that on either side of the house, are we debating between like things that could give you instant happiness, like avoiding pain versus happiness, avoiding boredom versus happiness. Like things that are generally good for people, like surviving, like eating, like working, like doing most of the normal stuff, we're going to prioritize that. Survival, what people do in the status quo in the real life. What is this debate about? This debate is about if you are a person that does the regular life path in his country, that goes to school, goes to university, gets the boring 9-to-5 job, goes out with the girlfriend, with his sweetheart, gets married, has the normal life. Or if we're talking about someone that's going to be more of a risk taker, someone that's going to maybe have his own business, someone that's going to be more out there, look for multiple partners, try to find the best relationship that he can have. 1 second, I'll give you clarification. The best relationship that he can have possible. We think that avoiding pain is minimizing risk, is choosing what's familiar, what's stable, what you know, and choosing to pursue boredom is also in touch with that. We think that's what we're talking about. If there's any clarifications, I'll take them now.
Yes, just to be sure. If you have fear to define, so do we have.
Okay, whatever. Sure. Okay, what do we think that people care about most in this debate? So first of all, the fact that you are a citizen in a Western country means that you're probably like middle class. You have a certain amount of enough money for food, rent, whatever. It doesn't mean that you're super well off. So we think that stability is something really important because the world is fast and changing. There are extenuating circumstances. Could be COVID, could be war, could be the economy changing, could be the market crashing. 1,001 stuff. No, that in general we want people like to have the feeling of stability. The counterfact of this is that when you are unstable, you have a lot of stress in life, and that is something very bad. Like if you don't have enough money, or if you lose your house or lose your car, that causes a lot of stress, and that is something very bad. We think that's why people care about stability. Now, we have two mechanisms here. First of all, why do we think pain causes instability? So there's the first and most obvious thing here is that when someone is suffering, when someone is going through a breakup that happened because he tried to go out with a new partner, when someone is dealing with a business that failed and money that he lost, he is in pain, and that pain is a vicious cycle of causing more instability in his life. Because when he's suffering through pain on a day-to-day basis, it's harder for him to do the regular things he needs to do to get back on his feet. It's harder for him to find another job. It's harder for him to continue. The second reason why pain causes instability is in terms of emotional scars and damage. The person that goes and starts with lots of different women and tries lots of different stuff and fails, at some point he's just not going to try anymore. He's going to be scarred. There's doors that are just going to be closed for him. The third damage that this does is also it translates into other issues in your life. So the fact that you're gone through more breakups, you've gone through more, companies that you built that got broken up or that failed, means that in general you're also going to be a less trustworthy person in other places in your life, whether it's a different job that you have in the future, whether it's with your children or with your parents or in other relationships and other friends that you have that are irrelevant of that, you're less trustworthy, you're less trustworthy of other people. The second mechanism is why avoiding pain actually creates stability. This is pretty intuitive, right? The fact that I choose to stay with the same partner, the fact that I choose to stay with a simple job that I know what is going to be likely that I'm going to have in the future, I know what my salary is, I know what my likely next positions are going to be, I have a pretty good understanding of what the future holds. I'm not doing anything risky, and this just creates a lot of stability. Before I move on to the second part of my speech, I'll take closing.
Avoiding the perception of risk doesn't mean avoiding risk. It does not necessarily mean that you avoid good decisions.
We think that in total, you have to accept the trade-off in the debate that someone that is avoiding pain is definitely going to be avoiding decisions that are more risky and that can cause pain. Avoiding pain is doing things that, avoiding things that might cause pain. So instead of going, to an elite unit in the army, choosing something that doesn't endanger me. Instead of trying to risk it for the really brilliant job, taking the job that's offered to me right now and that I know that I can have. I think that it's inherent to the notion. Okay, let's talk about the deeper layer of analysis on why the second most important thing for people after stability is self-fulfillment and self-actualization, right? So once people are happy, they have their basic needs, they have the stability that they're going to have their basic needs for the rest of their life. Why do we think that boredom is something that is actively good and that actually helps people become more happy and more self-fulfilled in their life? Notice that the problem today on their side of the house is that people are in some sort of rabbit race of managing as many things possible, of meeting up and having large social circles, being cool people that do different extracurriculars, they go ski, they go surfing, they go to the club, they go out to restaurants, they want to be successful, they want to go after the next promotion, want to get more money, want to buy a new car, always trying to look forward, always thinking about the next thing. We think that this is terrible. We think that on our side of the house, when you're someone that chooses to be more bored and to like less take on new experiences that might be dangerous and that might be out of your comfort zone, what it gives you is a lot of time to be with yourself. We think this time looks like meditation. It looks like slow information. It means that you're not on your phone every single second of the day. You're not trying to fill up your timetable every day with meeting more and more different people and doing other stuff. Why do we think this is important? We think that this builds a sort of layer of self-confidence within you that you know how to live and how to be present with yourself. Slowly, when you're bored, and through that boredom and through that meditation, we think people understand the things that they actually deeply care about and that they deeply want to do in life. And when they go out there and do those things, like having their relationship, like having children, like doing their job that they work in, whatever that job may be, when they do those things, they're also going to be much more in the moment. They're going to do them much more 100%, because I'm not trying to run away from boredom and fill my things up with as many stuff as possible. I'm choosing simple, pure things that I know that are good for me. If it's going on a date night with my wife every Thursday because that's just what we've been doing for 20 years. If it's taking my family on that yearly vacation. And in those things, I'm much more in the moment. When we compare that to the comparative, which is people that are in the rabbit race, that are trying to do new things, new experiences, to try to level up, to get something better, to get more extreme, to get more money, we think that it's just a much sadder way to live. We think that slowing down, understanding what you truly want, and focusing and being fully in the moment will make people happier on our side of the house.
Hope when you take that jump, you don't feel the fall. Panel case is going to be very simple and implicit engagement with opening down. Essentially, we're going to explain to you that this, on our side, you have a much more meaningful life, you are much more able to handle pain whenever it comes, and that you are, and that overall, pain is a better feeling comparatively to the boredom. First of all, just like so we are in agreement. We agree that when you avoid boredom, you will seek out new experiences. You will go out of your comfort zone, right? We agree that boredom is essentially a product of extreme stability. So if you don't have extreme stability, you are not bored, right? We still think that this is not the most extreme decisions, and this is not just like being extremely reckless with your life. And the main reason is that if you are extremely reckless with your life, this is also government side, as in it holds inherently risk of pain, and therefore this is not a debate. Great. So what happens when you are working on avoiding pain? First of all, you are taking less risky decisions, right? Why? Because you want to preserve your environment, right? It is something that is known to be safe, so you are going to make every effort that you can in order to preserve it, because this is something that you are used to, right? So even if it was painful at the beginning, the more that you are used to it, it's something that becomes not helpful. Secondly, just like that, you don't do changes because change has an inherent unpredictability of it, and you are scared that following change can cause pain, right? We think that means that you don't change the job that you love so much because you are scared that you won't find another one, right? The job that you hate so much because you are scared, right? You become more of a people pleaser. You don't want to engage with people on harder topics which might cause you pain, right? Why is this bad? Few reasons. First of all, because just like there is no guaranteedness of avoiding the pain, right? Because pain is inherently unpredictable, as I said, right? You might be fired due to circumstances outside of your control. You might be broken up with, right?
Yeah, right.
And without ability to handle. Secondly, we think that fear is something that is irrational within itself. It is something that scares you. So you are going to increase the volume of it in your mind, right? You're going to do an extra measure of avoiding that thing, even if it is not that painful and not that risky. You are still going to do it because you are scared of actually achieving pain or experiencing pain. Right? This is bad. Why? First of all, because you will have no tools to handle pain when it does strike you. Right? We honestly think that the things that need to worry you in life are not the worries that you predict, are the worries that hit you blindsided on a Tuesday when suddenly you get fired, when suddenly someone in your family gets sick and you don't know how to handle it because you spent your life avoiding pain. This is bad. Secondly, you just miss out on a ton of important experiences in your life. Notice that government wants you to believe that you gain stability, but in order to gain stability that is actually good and not just plain stability, you need to have reached a point of self-discovery and have taken enough risky decisions that allow you to achieve a stability that you are actually okay with and like. Right? We don't think that. Lastly, we think that it is bad to avoid pain because you simply won't take decisions that require pain. Right? We think that, for example, breaking up with in a toxic relationship or actively living a job that you don't like requires some level of pain in the beginning in order to achieve and tap into the greater impacts forward, right? Because there is uncertainty, but also because it hurts, right? You love that other person, you've grown attached to the people around you, and you want to avoid that. Great. That's enough. Before I continue, first half.
Uncertain pain is the same on both sides of the house. You have to accept that there's a trade-off between choosing to suffer things or choosing to be bored.
I agree there's a trade-off. I don't see how it didn't analyze it. Okay, so what do we think happens when you take riskier decisions? Because again, we agree that on our side you take bigger, riskier decisions. We think that there is an inherent big potential upside in those decisions. Before I continue, I would like to point out that the entire point I made about how you now have tools to handle pain interact with OG's case, right? When they talk about a vicious cycle, when they talk about the scars and damages that pain inflicts upon you, they are only correct insofar that you can't handle it. The more that you are able to handle pain, the less the cycle becomes vicious, right? If you get used to those painful feelings, at that point, you don't actively deteriorate and get instability. You don't actively accumulate scars and damages. No, you understand that if 5 girls rejected you, the 6th one won't hurt as much and you won't care moving forward. Great. So, risky decisions, right? We think that risky decisions, essentially, have a big potential upside, right? We think that without pain, there's no gain. Why? Why is it worth the trade? Right? Because generally, we think that other people that you interact with in the world are fairly risk avoidant, which means that comparatively, you have a potential to win big. Right? We think that fortune favors the bold in the sense that if other people don't take that jump and you do, you now have a larger opportunity to succeed. Right? First of all, notice that if it doesn't work, you won't be harmed to that big of an extent. First of all, because you're prepared, you knew in the first hand that it was risky, and secondly, because of my mechanisms about your experience in dealing with those cases. Lastly, why do we think that boredom is just like worse than pain in another method? Right? We think that pain is something that is momentary, right? It is recent. It is a physical sensation a lot of the time that oftentimes just like stops hurting you after long periods of time, right? You are upset that your girlfriend broke up with you, but in a decade you won't care that much about that job, right? We think that boredom just like is something that boredom reflects regret over time. Right? We think that the more time passes, the worse you feel about your missed opportunities and the things that you didn't achieve, right? We think that it builds up gradually. When I'm 40, I regret my 20s and 30s. When I'm 60, I regret the previous life that I didn't take up until now, right? We think that the worst feeling in the world is progressing your life and realizing that you aren't doing the things that you actively wanted to do, that you didn't dare, and you didn't live life to its fullest, like other narratives tell you to do all the time. We think that it is bad, and we tell you on its side opposition to live.
3 things in my speech. On why self-fulfillment is the only real metric by which we can judge this debate. 2, on the pain and risky things if they lead to more or less self-fulfillment, and lastly on stability. Why is self-fulfillment the only thing that we can really judge this debate by, right? Because of certainty, I don't know what the interests of the average individual in any given country, developed country, is. I personally am not materialistic. I really like to spend money on experiences. My sister, it's really important for her to be super successful. My mom would love to live on a farm and make little money and so that she can go by nature. The point is, the desires of people across places and even in the same country are so vast that even if you show some more success or even if you show better relationships, it's impossible for me to know which of those is more important to a single person. If I show you that we get more self-fulfillment and give people the room to both understand what it is that they want and B, actually succeed at it better, that's where we win this debate, because that's a prerequisite for any other metric in this debate. I also think that it allows you the most flexibility, so even if I want something now, my desires change over time, so if what I wanted when I was 16 isn't the same as what I had 25, 40, 50, when I'm in different contexts in life. So again, self-fulfillment is the state that allows me to be flexible and recognize what it is that I want, and we think that people are just also most likely to be successful at things they are passionate about and play to their strength and things they want to do for those reasons. What does this mean? We think that success depends on both knowing what you want and your ability to act on what you know, and two, the stability and knowledge that even if you take the risk, you won't ruin everything else that you care about in life. Let's talk about where, if pain or risky things actually leads to more self-fulfillment. Opening opposition tell us two things. One, you get more experience. I think that's what they were going for. You get more experience when you do more risky things, therefore you're exposed to significantly more things. And two, you learn an ability to actively deal with pain. I think there are two things that we're going to answer. One, why you have experience anyways, and two, why the balance of dealing with pain today, if you don't avoid it, is so great that the pain becomes ineffective at getting you to do things. Let's talk about that and the balance of pain. We think that pain is just an inherent part of life. We think that in the digital, global world, you're exposed to news, you're exposed to bad things that are happening, you are constantly exposed to what other people are doing, so you're comparing yourself and you think that it's bad. In interactions with people, you can question yourself, there can be misunderstandings. Other people's success sometimes comes at your expense, and therefore you feel like that's something that's bad. We think that this just happens. We think that what makes it bearable is the way we engage in minimizing the amount or the way those interactions and things affect us on a day-to-day basis. This means assessing when risks are worth it and when they are not worth it. Which to prioritize and when to take those risks and which to not. Maybe trying to find a new relationship while also trying to found a startup is something that I shouldn't do, but if when I come home from work I can't stand sitting around bored, then what I'm going to do is try to do more than one thing at once and then not prioritize between them. 3, planning actively how to minimize the risk even though I'm actively still going to do the things. Why do we think extreme avoidance, like what opening opposition is trying to push on us, is impossible? First of all, on their examples, a toxic relationship or a job that I'm suffering at is not a trade-off between pain and boredom, it's a trade-off between pain and pain. If I'm actively suffering at my job, then I'm in pain right now. I'm not bored, and therefore I'm still going to try to avoid that pain by trying to find another job. The difference is, maybe, do I spend time looking for another job before I leave mine, or do I immediately leave right now? But we think that the example here is a boring 9 to 5 versus finding my own startup and not a toxic relationship or a bad job. We think that we had inherently experienced, as we grown up, times when pain was worth it. When I put in effort, or my parents forced me to study, when I had to do those things, and at the end of the day, I got something good out of it. So I don't think that extreme avoidance is the likely case. 2, I think that negative feelings that aren't boredom, like embarrassment that I feel when I'm not successful and when I'm not being productive, or the fact that I don't want to be lonely or things like that, are going to push me to do things even if I'm not bored or something like that. And the desire for happiness. And yeah, that's worthwhile. Positive emotions. There are narratives telling me to be productive, and because of the way the world works today, I'm exposed to things and options, and my friend did a hobby, and I saw on Instagram that someone did something else, so I'm going to see them and want to do them regardless. What this means is that I'm not going to completely avoid everything, though I accept taking less risk. I think what I'm likely to do is, before I choose to do these things, it's not going to be enough that I'm bored right now. I'm going to take the added step of thinking, what are the likely risks of taking this action right now? What are other things I'm doing right now that are risky that might make it more likely that this fails and that I'm going to feel pain? This means doing things like planning how to succeed and making sure that things aren't risky. It's instead of, I wrote a beautiful blog post, I'm going to post it now, it's taking the time to say, wait, what are the risks involved in that? Maybe to be a successful blog, I need to plan my first 5 blog posts and not just post the first one. But I post the first one because I'm bored and I'm not avoiding the pain of nobody reading it or 5 people reading it and then no one caring about the next one because I didn't take the time to plan it in advance, so I don't know how my audience is going to respond because I didn't plan it. I don't think through enough of the risks, so I'm more likely to be surprised when I lose significantly more money than I planned because I didn't spend time thinking about it. And lastly, I'm more likely to cause irreversible harms. It's enough that this happens once for me to lose a bunch of money, or even twice because I keep being unavoidant, for the likely trauma to happen. Before I continue, I'll take closing.
If it is possible to become desensitized, then it is also possible to become hypersensentialized.
I'm not sure what that POI is. Sorry, I hope you'll explain it to me in your extension. What does this mean? This means that I've taken that risk, I've been avoidant, I've taken the pain. 1, they're less likely to succeed, and they're dependent on success, because if they don't succeed, they don't get the self-fulfillment. They just get the shitty feelings involved with having tried something and failed and blaming myself for it because it's a lot of pain. 2, there are things that I just can't continue to do time and time again. There's only so much money I have, so if I continually take risks on risky things and encounter that pain, I'm not going to be able to do it again. And therefore I just think that at the end of the day, they don't accept it. Given this balance of pain happens on our side, I think we still get risk-taking or big things being done when it's worth it and when I've thought through, so I maximize the chances of that success. But on our side, on their side, they don't have a balance. We think that this is also true for stability. We think that they have to inherently agree that there's a trade-off with stability, and we accept that. We just think that stability is a thing that enables you to take risks while still avoiding pain. If I can afford to lose $5,000 because of my boring 9-to-5 job, that allows me to take a risk on a hobby that I might not enjoy. That allows me to take a risk on a trip that might not be worth it without causing myself pain because I've planned for it and made sure that I can do it without being harmed. For these reasons, please go.
Up until this year, I'd never had a major injury. And this year, I split my foot open and I had to get stitches. And you know what? It really wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. And I think about all of the things that I never did, that I was too scared to do. The fact that I still can't ride a bike because I'm too scared to fall off. I think fear and doing things that are like scary to you is a muscle that you need to practice, and insofar as you don't do it, you bar yourself from experiences that will develop you as a person, that will give you joy, and that will be fun for you. Before I get to my case about what fulfillment is and why you inherently need to have freedom in order to have fulfillment, I'll do a few points of rebuttal. The first idea we get from the government is that we are all exposed to pain inherently. Please note that this debate is happening in developing countries, and please think about some of the people who you've had the pleasure of debating in European debate competitions. I think the extent to which people in the West are exposed to pain and in developing countries is extraordinarily minimal, and when they say, but you watch the news, but you experience all these things, the vast majority of people in the West are never hungry for food. They never experience true loss. They never have to experience pain in any real capacity, and if they don't want to watch the news, then they don't have to watch the news. They can curate their algorithms to show them cute cats instead of anything else, and really, truly, never have to engage with anybody else's pain, because you can just say that it triggers you, and then never have to engage with that idea in the first place. So firstly, I just don't think that you engage with as much pain as they say you do. I think this is a very Israeli perspective and doesn't really occur for the vast majority of developing countries. When they tell you, I will then take all of this stuff and I will meditate and self-reflect and become, no, bullshit. You become complacent. It is extraordinarily comfortable not to feel pain. So you don't meditate because you feel fine. You don't really feel the need to do any further self-exploration. So you don't develop this quiet confidence that they say. The second thing they will say is, don't be ridiculous, guys. I'm going to test the trade-off and see if it's worth it for me on our side. But then on your side, you're going to burn through all your money and you're going to make all of these irrational decisions. No, like that, if we want to be reasonable on both sides, then we need to be reasonable on both sides. And I agree that it is likely that on both sides you will make some kind of, no thank you. You will think about what the trade-off is and whether actually you think it is that worth it or not. What do I think all this analysis gives you? I think it gives you that you become much better at assessing the trade-off on our side of the house. Because when you experience failure more often, when you can actually tell what the cost of pain is, what the cost of rejection is, what that does to you in your body, how long it takes you to recover from these things, how long it's going to take you to find a new job or a new relationship, that's when you can assess the cost of something much, much more real, when it's not the anxiety in your head that I will stay alone and I will be broke and I will live under a bridge, but rather the truth of what it is to find a new job or a new relationship. And I actually think that you become far, far better at just assessing what this actually looks like. Lastly, we get the idea that I will just naturally get pushed to do things, and so I will do them. Firstly, note that you have to get pushed to do these things. Somebody else has to tell you to do them. You never develop the feeling of what it is that you want to do because you studied when your parents told you to do it, and you did well when your teachers told you to do it, when your coach told you to do it. I don't think that you develop as much of a sense of doing things because you want them, even if they're difficult, or even if other people don't want you to do them. But secondly, I think you become the kind of person who figures out that they're pretty decent at one thing when they're in school, and they just do that for the rest of their life because it is incredibly comfortable. They're not the kind of person who tries a new hobby because they try it for the first time and they're not that good at it, but they already know that they're okay at this other thing, so they just continue doing that, which is pretty nice. Doing crochet is pretty nice, but there are far more opportunities in knitting. I just never start knitting because it's scary, and my knitting is going to look way worse than my crochet does. Right, sure.
So the difference between boredom and pain is that pain, when I experience it one time, it leaves a scar, and when I experience boredom, there is no scar.
Phenomenal. I'm going to address this pretty soon, so I will flag behind you. What do we think one needs in order to have self-fulfillment? I think the answer is freedom. Freedom means the ability to make choices. It means my ability to decide what it is that I want and do not want to do, and my case is going to explain why we actually get far more freedom to act on our side of the house. I think freedom soothes your anxieties because it means that you know that even if the circumstances change, you have capacity and you have trust in yourself that you will be able to change your situation into something better. But secondly, it means that I get to make much more individual choices. I get to fulfill myself as an individual, not because my mom told me to study, not because I had a good piano teacher and I became good at piano, but rather because this is my decision right now, currently. No more. Great. What do we think happens far more on our side? I think you discover that failure is not that bad. Because the false thing we're getting from government is this idea that you start making these risky decisions when you are an adult, and there is money to be lost, and there's jobs to be lost, and relationships to be lost. If you are this kind of person, you act in this way since you are a child. When the failures are far, far smaller, when your parents can protect you, when people can give you back the, 50 shekels that you lost making a shitty bet or whatever. I think at that point, when over time, since you are a child, while you are developing, you make risky decisions, and you see, firstly, you develop tools to deal with this kind of failure and this kind of risk. You know that it stings now, but in 2 weeks I'm going to be laughing about it with my friends. You know that other people just don't care that much about your failures because they're too busy thinking about their own lives. You know that you have safety nets. You develop emotional tools in order to be able to deal with these failures because you fail much, much more often, first on a small scale and then on a bigger and bigger scale, that you actually become way better at assessing and learning and knowing what kind of failure is worth it and just carrying that burden and carrying that failure when it does eventually happen. I think on their side, you have the fear, right? You don't know what is going to happen. You don't know what it feels like to fail because you haven't failed enough, and so you never develop those tools. I think when it happens then, because I haven't developed the tools, when I inevitably lose my job, when I inevitably lose some money on a shitty investment, I'm far, far less equipped to deal with it, and that's when I get the trauma. That's when I'm more scared in the future to do things that are going to benefit me because that pain hurts so much because I only did it once. We think you need to do it over and over again, and this is something that you get far, far more on our side of the house. I think when you have trust in yourself that whether things go well or they do not go well, firstly, you're much more willing to swing big in a way that most people aren't, which means that you are in any case more likely to just succeed and not experience that pain in the first place, but that you know that even if you experience the pain, you will be okay and you have others around you to help you. This means, firstly, that you have less anxiety about the future because you know that no matter what happens, you will be able to take care of yourself. Secondly, it means that you allow yourself to grow and change as a person throughout your life because you know that you can make that change if you decide that you want to take a different career path or a different relationship. I think this means that, look at how stressed people in the West are. I don't think that having no pain actually makes you happier or just makes you less stressed. I think that when you know that you will have the tools and the ability to deal with whatever happens, that is when you are far happier, have a better life, take bigger opportunities, make sure that your life is happier, and have freedom to trust yourself to ensure that you are doing the most that you can with the one life that you have.
1. Our extension is this. Success for an average individual necessarily goes through boredom. You cannot become a successful individual without getting bored on the way, and success is the most important metric in this debate, as we will weigh. So let's start with talking about how does an average individual become successful. Note, you are given average. You are not particularly smart. You are not particularly rich. You're just a normal person, which begs the question, how do you get success? You have to become skilled. And boredom is the only way you become skilled. Why? Because you start without the skill, right? You don't know anything about programming or math or law or anything, right? So you go to school and you study. You study for 12 years throughout, from elementary school through high school, things that probably most of them don't interest you, but you need to get good grades to get into a good college. And then when you get to the good college, you still need to study very hard in order to get good grades in your college, so you will be able to get to a good job after that. And this requires a lot of boredom. It requires you to attend every class and listen for hours and hours and hours and do all the homework and study for the exam for hours. And this note is not painful in any way, it is just boring. Most people do not get the fiat of having decided in a debate to not avoid boredom, and this is the main reason they eventually drop out. They cannot bring themselves to sit for that long, but then later down the line they experience far more pain. They're just short-termistic and don't make the right decision in that moment. So what this means is, and you know, becoming skilled in this way is just the main way that you can become successful. Because when we're talking what I'm saying with successful, I mean like getting a nice, cushy, high-paying job. Because the more the better a job is in terms of like the money that it gives and the treatment that it gives you as an employee, the more people probably want that job. And so if you want to outcompete them, you therefore must necessarily be better skilled than them. Since you are, again, average, you're not more well-connected than them, you didn't start richer or smarter than them, and so you must specifically outcompete them on this skill that you necessarily have acquired by this boredom. And note, this essentially, this cycle remains when you enter the corporate ladder, right? Because you start a new job and you need to learn a lot of skills, and those skills are boring. And if you want to get promoted eventually, you have to stay where you are for a long enough time so that you can become successful over time. You need to be obedient, because if you are not obedient because you're too bored, then your boss will not like you and will not promote you and not give you pay raises. And don't concede that you are more obedient on our side. So, what does this actually mean? It means that that on our side, you just managed to get to a better paying job that gives you more freedom and more free time than you would have otherwise. This is crucially important, but before I get to why, closing, opening.
I think that what you're describing is probably both about boredom, but also about pain, because failing homework and tests is painful.
I mean, failing homework surely is, failing a test surely is painful, which is why to avoid it you will study harder, and studying harder is strictly more boring and not more painful. I don't understand why studying specifically is so painful when it is just going over the material again and again and again until you have managed to memorize it or understand it, right? This is not the same thing as pain. So let's get to implication. Why is success so crucially important? First and foremost, money is the solution to the vast majority of life's problems. What do I mean by that? I mean that if you want materialistic things, you get materialistic things. You can get a better apartment, you can get a nicer car, nicer food, all that stuff. Secondly, it gets you to experiences. If you're not materialistic like Tamar and you want to go on more trips, you can get that. If you want to start a family, that's usually very prohibitively expensive, which is why birth rates are dropping, and so you need that good job and you need that money, and lots of people do want that. Secondly, why is success important? Because I want to know that I am not a failure. If I manage to live, quote unquote, a full life where I get those ups and downs and start up and fail that startup and do all that sort of crazy things, if at the end of that tunnel I'm still not successful, I will hate myself for it. I will feel like I have failed as a person. It means that I will see myself as worse, as lesser, and that in and of itself is the pain that we're trying to avoid when we are going through all that boredom. This is the worst pain you can experience. This is the alienation from the self, the belief that I am not as good of a person as everybody else around me, which is absolutely horrible. Thirdly, note that this affects all my relationships relationships with literally everyone around me. If I did not manage to get a good job, my parents are probably more disappointed at me and don't and have a worse relationship with me as well. It means that all of my friends probably have a worse relationship with me as well, because I'm less successful. I'm less able to go to parties with them or whatever it is that they do when I cannot afford to do so. It means that my relationship with my coworkers is worse. I will try to get another POI from closing if at all possible. No? Let the record show I tried. Okay, so, yes, so what we think this essentially proves is simple. When you are on your deathbed and you measure the ups and downs of your life, when you, after all the negation of, well, this is actually pain and this is actually boredom, you're left with one thing. What have I achieved? What have I done? Have I actually left anything behind me? Do I have a family? Have I had all the experiences that I wanted to have? And to have all those experiences, necessarily, I have to have undergone all that boredom. I have to have studied hard for more than a decade. And that studying is the only thing that could have possibly brought me to where I wanted to go. I will do just one single point of engagement before I leave. I think that when that pain in and of itself is just not as bad as, pain in and of itself is worse than boredom for a very simple reason. Pain is not bounded by time. What I mean by that is, boredom can change on a dime. If I happened onto a boring situation, I can extricate myself relatively easily by doing something that is more interesting. Whereas if I stumbled upon something that is painful, that is far less reversible. And so initially avoiding it is already the worst decision because only one of them is reversible. For all those reasons, I beg you to propose.
Because what he ought to have felt facing the lion, he feels facing the cube. Here's the extension then from Stiassnie. Two things. Firstly, you fail at establishing new relationships and pursuing fulfilling ways. This is both because the generic analysis, but also because of the cube. Then secondly, I think that you have a less fulfilling personal life because you pursue less hobbies and things to do. Let's start. Some general frame. I think the top half essentially agrees that pain means that you have some sort of trade-off between risk and between what you're actually going to do. All wise to push that you deal better with the risk at the time that you deal with when you are more aware of the pain. I want to establish that you perceive the risk incorrectly. So here's the thing. Paul says that fear is irrational, but he doesn't justify it. You sometimes fear things very rationally. I fear getting in a car crash. This is very, very rational. What's irrational is fearing getting in a car because of a car crash. This is not established by us. So let's establish it. Here's the thing. Look, at the point where evolution needed you, the pain was caused by evolution in order to make you avoid direct risk that's risky very much to your life, like a lion chasing you. It had to be overpowering over all other senses. So it had to turn off your brain. You had to act immediately. It had to impede the thoughts that you had in order to cause you to run at the sight of a lion. This means that generally speaking, this feeling that you get when you're about to be hurt, when something hurts you or your hand bleeds, is not feelings that allows you to consider rational thoughts, because your body was not meant to consider those thoughts. But then secondly, and this is also central to this, there is no innate sense of what's painful, right? Stabbing myself in the finger, probably painful, but is it as painful as cutting my leg off? Probably not. Pain is comparative. And we calibrate based on the past experiences that we have. This is because it is impossible to encode the genetic information of what's supposed to be painful and not supposed to be painful. So you calibrate based on past experiences. But more mechanistically, your nerves literally go out as they expose more. They calibrate more, the salt in them calibrates more. Secondly, the hormones calibrate more. Thirdly, the neuron paths within your brain change, so your brain reacts to the pain much faster, which means that it's able to mitigate it and consider its own reactions. What does this mean? It means that generally speaking, you're much more risk averse than you should be. This is because you're not experiencing the amount of pains that you had to be experiencing in the wild. So you don't experience those types of pains, you become more risk averse as time goes on because you experience less pain, which means that things that should be painful before become even more painful as time goes on. This is why the average person in a modern society has anxiety. This is why the average person in modern society is afraid of trying new things out and prefers to brain rot at his home. Let's start then with the actual extension. Yes?
On our side of the debate, I buckle up and selective about which drivers I go on a ride with. On your side of the debate, I hitchhike on a motorcycle to cut the ride by 2 hours so I'm not bored while I'm on my way.
You're misunderstanding. On your side, you think of hours upon hours as you describe of which driver should you go with. On our side, you pick a driver and realize the risk is not that fucking great. Okay? Very clear. So here's the thing. Look, I think in relationships, what happens is very simple. So the generic analysis, which OO gives to some degree, but this is reframed by our additional framing here, is that, well, you don't want to approach new people because it's scary and you might be rejected. Oz explains that you deal better with this in the future. But I say that to begin with, you perceive your chance of success at much lower than it actually is. Likely, if you approach some cute girl, she's also interested in you, she also wants to talk with you. People like relationships, they like meeting new people, they like fulfilling their most basic desire. I think this is probably true. So you're probably going to succeed. But you misjudge the risk because you haven't adjusted to the actual risk at hand. Then the second extension. More importantly, at the point where you meet someone, if you're risk averse, they are somewhere on the spectrum. But they're probably less risk averse than you at the point where you try to avoid pain. So if they're trying to avoid boredom, for example, or they're less risk averse than you, what happens there is that they move on faster than you. You want to have sex on the 10th date after you've known each other, took each other on dinner. They want to fuck on the 3rd date. You're unwilling to do so. They move on, they pick someone better for them. They have plethora of options because they're less selective than you, and they're more willing to commit faster than you are. Secondly, I think that you're also you're also less willing to call each other lovers, you're also less willing to go on dates, make plans for the future. So generally speaking, people tend to move on at the point where they see you're unwilling to commit because they have different perceptions, different expectations, and they have other options. Secondly, even when you meet someone that is as risk averse to you, or more risk averse to you, this is bad. This is very, very bad. First, because you might be selective upon some features of his, but he might be selective upon different features of yours. And this is important, because there's no guarantee for a match. So you probably just avoid each other, even though you could have been very fulfilling for each other in the long run. Then secondly, I think at the point where you already meet, things tend to fester. So you have some problems within your relationship, but it's just not worth bringing up for now. It will be painful to bring it up. You'll have to have a very painful conversation. And notably, again, the calibration is bad for you. You don't have these conversations, which means that you tend to not have them more in the future. The problem is that problems pile as time goes on. You become less and less satisfied within your relationship because you didn't address the issues early on. But if you got into a relationship with someone that avoids boredom, then that's worse because he completely dominates you in terms of communication. He voices your problems, but you're not willing to voice yours. This is the first extension on why relationships become unfulfilling. This is very important because relationships means that you're more stable. This is one of the main ways for people to gain fulfillment from their own life. This is one of the main ways that people actually enjoy their life. I think this is important for them. This is the base drives that everyone has. And therefore, this is probably important. Notably, this mitigates any financial clash that OG tries to push because you divide the cost by 2. So this is also an impact that we're able to play. Thirdly, I think it probably fucking sucks to wake up like in 2 years into a relationship and realize that the other person doesn't truly understand you, doesn't truly know what you're about. Because to begin with, you're risk averse, but now you're unwilling to leave, so you stay in an unfulfilling relationship that is incapable of providing you with all of the good things that a relationship should provide you with. This all means that you have a significantly less fulfilling life because the most important person to you is just non-existent. But this also applies to friendships, by the way, because friendships have expectations between people. So even your friends invite you less out, hang out less with you. This is all.
We won this debate simply because we show you that boredom is a stepping stone that you always have to take and you always have to experience to get anything that you want in life. You have to accept boredom. Why is it important? 3 things I'm going to add here. Firstly, even if you really, really love something, it's still going to become boring to some extent. Even if you love cooking, working at a restaurant is still a daily job that you're going to get tired, and most of the time you're going to do the same thing every day on a daily job, even if you like it and you want to work it. Even if you have a passion, even if you really love debating all the time, and learning about the party dynamics in the Netherlands is fucking boring. Why would they do Euros there? Secondly, we think that while Oren weighed really beautifully why economy and getting money specifically and financial stability is important, I would like to note that it directs also on other clashes in this debate. Relationships are also boring. It's coming to the same person every day. It's having sex with the same person every day, which becomes incredibly boring. It's the same communication style. And I see a lot of porn, and I see people which are prettier and have bigger dicks and bigger boobs. I have the same kinks that I do not have necessarily the other things that I like and the person like, and sometimes I want something more. Growing children, having the same family and the same children is boring. I need to always change diapers. It's so boring to change a diaper. The baby wakes me up at night and I'm tired. I needed to help my child understand math. So I'm sitting with my child and I'm teaching him what negative numbers are, and they literally do not know and then do not understand. This is boring. And we think that this boredom is important. Even if it's boring to you to have a lot of sex with the same person all of the time, it's important for you because this is where long-term connections are being built. This is where you get to know the person deeply. This is where you need to experience a lot of time to get to those crucial points where you talk about and learn new things about the person every day. You have to trust this boredom. We got a rebuttal that says, yes, but you're going to sometimes have also failures and pains throughout the school or whatnot. This is much less happening than boredom. Obviously, the average person is experiencing a lot of failures and pain throughout their life, but this is happening much to less extent when it comes to repetitive things that you do every day, such as being in a relationship, such as being at work. Most of the experiences that you have are experiences of boredom rather than pain. Yes, you might fail in university, but university is much more boring than it is painful to, fail calculus or whatnot. We think that most of the people do not experience consecutive failure over time when they are in the daily life. Then let's do some points of engagement. Firstly, about learning how to work with difficulty and building resilience. If I encounter less pain from the get-go, if I have much more stable life, I do not understand why their extent of resilience is so important to me, right? Yes, obviously I'm going to experience some pain, but if I have much less financial crisis, I have much stable job, I do not know why experiencing a financial crisis once instead of 5 times will build a resilience for the 6th crisis. I do not need this resilience. I will experience much less pain. But also, we think that even if you live boring life, it still beats you the minimum of resilience necessary. I do not need to be a superhuman who never cries. I can cry and I can fail. I can cry and I can fail and I can experience this pain. It sucks, but I think that regular life is going to make you encounter some sort of crises nonetheless, because that's life. I do not need to understand why you need to actively seek pains and crises and really be good at this, at a point at which you experience much less of them, but at a point at which those they are, I think they are just enough for you because they are the crises that you're just likely to meet on your daily life. Then they say, but I'm going to understand how good it is to get beaten up by getting beaten up. I don't need to get beaten up to understand what is pain. I have imagination, I have experiences. Obviously, they are not the same as how am I going to deal with failures and I'm going to teach myself, but I know what failure is. I have imagination. I know what the financial crisis is. I might have friends who have gone through it. I know what a breakup feels like. I know that it's hard because I watched this TV show. Obviously, this is less good, but I don't think that this is necessary for me to experience this crisis and to experience many of them to know how to deal with it on the basic levels of things. So we think that there, you just get most of the things that you want, and note how this is also answers CO, specifically when it comes to relationships. I have imagination, I have experiences, I still know what to do to some extent, and I think that while trying less and choosing your girl correctly, and not just to hit on every girl in the party, we think that this is a good before I move on, I'll take closing.
Do you think Oren chose to do math because it is boring for him?
No, but Oren needed to pass through a lot of boring courses, and by the way, Oren's courses are incredibly boring. He talks about them to me all the time because he needs to go through random shit to get to the courses that he actually likes, to get to the best and goodest math that he can do. Let's then direct way about OG2. Because OG told me I'm going to take less risks, I'm going to lose less. Know that already, OO points out a missing burden that tells me, aha, but with risks comes a profit. At a point at which OG did not analyze to you, how much am I going to lose or gain from the specific risk? You just gave me there is a risk I'm going to lose. Obviously, sometimes risks come with a profit. They did not give you the math to actually calculate how much profit am I going to get from taking or not taking those risks. What we're telling you here that specifically, the risk of boredom, this is something that is going to get the profit that you are much more likely to get. This is the life that the average person is taking, right? They're choosing a career, they're raising a family. This is usually the choices that they're coming to make in life, not just random financial, where am I going to make money? This is much more in trade-off within this debate because I have a boring decision which I'm going to make rather than a risky decision. So we think that this is clear enough to be more relevant to the motion, but we just think that we absolutely show you why the reward is much, much greater than what you're going to experience later. Therefore, what you're going to fail when you're not going to college is much, much worse, getting no stable job, than what you're going to get from actually going there and experiencing this boredom. Therefore, the impact is much, much clearer there. CG.
Most happiness that most people get in the world is from having love and from having children. This is what brings people the most self-fulfillment in life. I'm sorry, all of these unrealistic characterizations of high-tech bros that get to a job and then are happy or not happy about it. No, most people actually bring children to the world, love them the most, care for them, being in good relationships and are happy about it, or being in bad relationships and then suffer throughout their life, doesn't matter in what job they do. This is what is winning this day. Okay, let's start with externally answering CG, okay? Because I think it is needed, right? What do they say? They say you need to be bored to be able to succeed, firstly, in the career. And now, they get a POI from OO and they dismiss it because it was one example, so I'm going to give more examples for why you get to have through pay, right? We think when you study and when you work and all of this kind of stuff, you need to sacrifice, right? You need to give up things. You need to go to study for this test instead of going to my friend's birthday party. This is not boredom, this is pain. I need to sacrifice spending time with my girlfriend to stay late at work, and this is not boredom, this is pain, right? All of those sacrifices that you make fall to our side of this debate. Don't understand why you're unique. Second thing that they do is that they weigh themselves under, right? They say, money is the solution to everything, because you can either go material or have experiences. OG didn't say that, said that, I'm not sure. The problem is that CG really analyzes why it is not true, because they say the word deathbed, right? When I'm on my deathbed, and I think on what I've achieved in life, who thinks about their inheritance? Who thinks about what food I've eaten or where I've traveled? No, most people think about their spouse. Most people think about their children. They think about the people that are closest to them and they love the most and that fill their life with meaning. This is what you think about. This is what is important to you. This is how this weighing plays out. Right? And now, the answers that CG gives to us are kind of the same. They say, oh, the same analysis on boredom applies to relationships too, because you have to change diapers, and you have to have sex with the same person, and you have to teach negative numbers, and those things are boring, right? I think it comes back kind of to Prime Minister's characterization, or to Tamar's analysis on competing merit, or like a balancing of pain, right? Because we think, specifically when it comes to children and relationships, there is the factor of love, right? Even if it's boring, parents do it with love and feeling of meaning, and they do it anyway, right? At the point that you get deep, meaningful connections, then having sex with the same person is maybe boring, but still very, very fun. At the point that you get real love for your spouse or your children, it is not as boring because it gives you meaning. This is where in the entirety of debate you get the most balancing powers. So even specifically on this point, it is enough to win, because on other points you have this mitigating powers like DPM analyzes to you. Here you have better balancing powers. Now, let's talk about self-fulfillment.
Do what?
No, I'll accept it.
Now, okay, most of your comparisons are pain against pain. Note that being lonely is also incredibly painful. Fearing that you're going to be single at 40 is still incredibly painful. You still need to do something to avoid also pain.
Rwad's analysis is good enough to answer it. The fact that you try to avoid being lonely, but you also try to avoid being bored. And OG themselves characterize this as trying to get into more relationships and not staying bored, right? I'm sorry, you can't contradict that. Now, let's talk about self-fulfillment, because we are trying to get live to that it is the only metric in this debate, because different people have different desires, and it is the only thing that stays flexible, right? It's like saying the only way to win this debate is to win this debate, right? I agree. Why? Because self-fulfillment is the metric you are trying to maximize on in your life. This is exactly the debate. Whether you don't want to be bored, whether you don't want to experience pain. It is in the eye of the beholder. If, as I'm studying in school, I think about the day that I'm gonna have a 9-to-5 job and be stable, and this is the thing that brings me motivation, and this is what makes me happy, it is then I get it, then I'm self-fulfilled in that way. And if I feel like, if I think about having a startup when I finish school, then I'm happy when that happens. So what are the real cases that we get from top half? From OG, we get, I am okay with doing less things, to chase less and being more with the present, and this is easier to achieve. And from opposition, I get more resilience to pain. It means that I get to do more exciting stuff. 3 ways on why relationships are the thing that uniquely wins over these cases. Firstly, because relationships, as I've already said in my opening, is the most accessible to most people, right? We think not everyone is smart enough, not everyone is empathetic enough, not everyone is going to make it in life, and many, many people are going to have accidents that are going to shake their stability either way. But most people can get into a successful relationship, can be empathetic towards their partner, and derive the self-fulfillment from that alone. People bringing kids is not comparative to anything, and all parents love their kids and get self-fulfillment from that. So when you have better parenting, better relationships, this achieves both. Secondly, we think it appeals to both metrics, right? I'm going to do this shortly, right? Because both people who want stability get it on the side where you have a better relationship with less fights, and people who want the experimental stuff get it better because relationships are always a unique experience and always a unique achievement, right? No one has had the relationship that I am currently having. That means that I am achieving something unique in my life, something that I could look back and be happy about, stuff like that. But thirdly, the relationship is specifically affecting how I am perceiving my self-fulfillment, right? I might have been the adventurous type, but when I met my wife, and now I love her very much and want her to have the best life, I tame a little and I think, oh, maybe I don't need to experience everything, I also need to be a little bit stable, right? We think that this is where the flexibility weighing comes to our part, because we show you why this flexibility comes better on our side. Why, when I go and have better relationships that don't pressure me towards bad things, flexibility actually means I get better self-fulfillment on our side. That is a better metric to rely on. Seal.